I never imagined my fairy tale wedding would turn into my worst nightmare. Standing in front of the antique mirror in my bridal suite, everything felt perfect: the venue, the dress, the excitement in the air. I was about to marry Chad, the man I thought I would spend my life with. But just moments before walking down the aisle, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, Bernice, arrived with accusations that would shatter my world. A heated confrontation ensued, culminating in a shocking betrayal from the man I loved. That slap, just minutes before my wedding, marked the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. I never imagined that my fairy tale wedding would turn into my worst nightmare. Standing in front of the antique mirror in my bridal suite, I watched as my best friend, Ashley, carefully adjusted my veil. The air was electric with excitement. After all, this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. "Holly, you look absolutely stunning," Ashley whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I smiled back at her through the mirror, my hands trembling slightly as I smoothed the delicate lace of my dress. It was perfect. Everything was perfect. The venue, a gorgeous historic mansion surrounded by lush gardens, was exactly what I'd dreamed of since I was a little girl. The morning had been flawless. The makeup artist had worked her magic, transforming me into what felt like a princess. The bridesmaids, dressed in soft pink, were laughing, taking selfies, and sharing excited whispers. Even the weather seemed to cooperate, with the sun shining brightly through the tall windows, casting a golden glow over everything. "5 minutes until we start," the wedding coordinator called from outside the door. My heart skipped a beat. In just moments, I'd be walking down the aisle to marry Chad, the man I'd been with for the past 3 years, the man who proposed to me under the stars at our favorite beach spot. But then, the knock came that would change everything. "Holly, dear," came the voice of Bernice, my soon-to-be mother-in-law. There was a sweetness to her tone, but one I had learned to be wary of. "Could I have a moment with you?" Ashley shot me a concerned look. She knew about the tension between Bernice and me. Throughout our engagement, Bernice had been difficult, making little remarks about my background, my career, and how I wasn't quite what she had envisioned for her Chad. But I'd brushed it off, telling myself that today would be different. "Of course, come in," I called out, forcing a smile. The door opened, and there she stood, in her expensive designer dress, pearls gleaming at her neck, her face wearing that familiar tight smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Girls, could you give us a moment?" she asked, eyeing my bridesmaids. They hesitated, but I nodded, signaling that it was okay. As they filed out, Ashley squeezed my hand reassuringly. The sound of the door closing behind them seemed unnaturally loud, amplifying the silence that settled in. "Holly," Bernice began, walking toward me, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. "I think we need to have a little chat about the way you've been handling things." Her voice had lost the sugary sweetness, now laced with that cold edge I had come to recognize all too well. I took a deep breath, determined not to let her spoil my day. "Bernice, I'm not sure what you mean, but can't this wait until after the ceremony? We're about to start." "No, it cannot wait," she cut me off sharply. "Do you think I haven't noticed how you've been turning my son against me? The way you manipulate him? Make him take your side in everything?" Her voice was rising now, the facade of politeness crumbling completely. I felt my stomach drop. This was not how this day was supposed to go. Through the window, I could hear the excited chatter of guests arriving and the string quartet starting to warm up. Everything was in place for a perfect wedding, except for this moment unfolding in front of me. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of how my perfect day would spiral into chaos, that my dream wedding would become the day that changed my life forever, just not in the way I'd expected. "Bernice, please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Today is supposed to be about love and family coming together." The white fabric of my dress rustled as I turned to face her fully. Outside, I could still hear the music playing, a cruel contrast to what was happening in this room. Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. "Love? Family? You think you deserve to be part of our family?" She stepped closer, her expensive perfume almost suffocating in the small space. A small-town girl like you, with your community college degree and your job at that little marketing firm. My hands started trembling, but I balled them into fists at my sides. 3 years of subtle jabs and backhanded compliments had led to this moment. I love your son, Bernice, and he loves me. That's all that matters. Love! She spat the word out like it was poison. What do you know about love? You've trapped my son somehow, convinced him that you're worthy of the Brown family name, but I see right through you. Just then, the door burst open. Chad stood there, handsome in his black tuxedo, his face concerned. Mom? Holly? What's going on? I heard raised voices. Bernice's face transformed instantly, tears welling up in her eyes. Oh, Chad, thank goodness you're here. I was just trying to talk to Holly about the family business matters, and she just attacked me verbally. What? I gasped, completely blindsided by her lie. That's not true at all, Chad. She came in here and started... But I never got to finish that sentence. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Chad's face hardened, his eyes turning cold in a way I'd never seen before. He strode across the room, and before I could react, his hand connected with my cheek in a sharp, stinging slap. The sound echoed through the room. My veil slipped slightly, and I stood there frozen, my hand rising to my burning cheek. The perfect bride in the perfect dress, struck by her groom minutes before their wedding. Don't you dare call my mother a liar, Chad growled, his voice low and dangerous. Bernice stood behind him, a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The silence that followed was suffocating. Through the open door, I saw Ashley and my other bridesmaids standing frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and confusion. Several guests had stopped by, their mouths agape, witnessing the tension in the room. At that moment, everything hit me like a freight train. The little red flags I had dismissed, the moments where I brushed off Chad's controlling behavior, his overprotectiveness, all of it came rushing back in a flood. This wasn't just about today, about the wedding. This was who he truly was, and this was who they both were. Get out, I whispered at first, barely able to hold myself together. My voice, however, grew stronger as I spoke again. Both of you, get out. Holly, Chad began, his face pale as realization sank in, but the moment had passed. Get out! I screamed, my voice reverberating through the empty room. The wedding is off. Get out before I call the police. They left quickly, Bernice pulling a bewildered Chad along behind her. As soon as the door shut, I collapsed into Ashley's arms, finally allowing the tears I had been holding back to flow freely. What I didn't know at the time was that this moment, as devastating as it was, would soon reveal even darker secrets. The next day, I received a phone call that would uncover truths I never saw coming. I spent the night at Ashley's apartment, still in my wedding dress, not able to bring myself to take it off. It felt like if I did, it would make everything real, as if somehow the horrific events would vanish. The $3,000 dress that was supposed to be a memory of joy now felt more like a costume from a nightmare. You need to eat something, Ashley said softly, setting a cup of tea and toast in front of me. I barely glanced at it, my phone buzzing continuously on the coffee table with missed calls from Chad, his mother, family members, and wedding guests. I couldn't face any of it. I keep replaying it in my mind, I whispered, touching the bruise on my cheek that had started to form. The way he looked at me, like I was nothing. And his mother, that smile, like she was enjoying this. Ashley squeezed my hand in silent support. I've already taken care of everything. I called the venue, and your parents are handling the rest. You don't have to worry about anything. Just focus on yourself. Around 3 a.m., exhausted from hours of crying, I finally drifted to sleep on Ashley's couch. But at 7 a.m., my phone rang, shattering the quiet. A number I didn't recognize flashed on the screen. Hello? My voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Is this Holly Collins? A woman's voice, unfamiliar but urgent, asked. My name is Brittany Brown. I'm Chad's sister-in-law, well, ex-sister-in-law, and there's something you need to know. I sat up, suddenly alert. I had never met Brittany. Chad had always said his brother's ex-wife was unstable and that they had severed ties with her years ago. I saw what happened on social media, Brittany continued. People are posting about it. Holly, you need to know you're not the first. This is what they do. It's a pattern. My hand shook as I clutched the phone tighter. What do you mean? I asked, the knot in my stomach growing tighter. The wedding day drama, the public humiliation, Bernice orchestrates it every time. She did it to me 5 years ago, a bit differently then. There was Caroline before me. We were all gold diggers, not good enough for the Brown men. Ashley, who had woken up and was now sitting beside me, could hear everything. Her eyes widened as Brittany continued. But here's what you need to know. It's not just about control. The Browns, they're running a scheme. They target women with potential, women with careers or family money. They orchestrate these public breakups or divorces, and then they sue for emotional damage, defamation, or anything they can think of. They've been doing it for years. My mind was spinning. But Chad, we were together for 3 years. Yes, they play the long game. Brittany's voice was bitter. They make you fall in love, make you trust them. Bernice picks the targets and her sons execute the plan. But I have proof, Holly. Documents, recordings, and bank statements. I've been gathering evidence for years, but I've never found someone brave enough to help me expose them until now. I looked at the bruise on my arm from where Chad had grabbed me after the slap, and something shifted inside me. The hurt and confusion of yesterday transformed into something else. Determination. Send me everything you have, I said, my voice stronger than it had been since the incident. Every single piece of evidence. I'll do better than that, Brittany replied. I'm in the city. Let's meet. There's more you need to know, and it's not safe to talk about over the phone. As I ended the call, Ashley stared at me. Holly, what are you thinking? I stood up, finally ready to get out of my wedding dress. I'm thinking it's time to show the Browns what happens when they mess with the wrong woman. Little did I know the evidence Brittany had would reveal a web of deception so intricate it would shake the very foundation of the Browns' carefully constructed empire. Ashley insisted on coming with me to meet Brittany. We chose a quiet cafe in a part of town far from where the Browns lived. My hands shook slightly as I stirred my untouched coffee, jumping at every person who walked through the door. Finally, a woman in her mid-30s with straight dark hair walked in. Even before she introduced herself, I knew it was Brittany. She had that same haunted look in her eyes that I'd seen in my reflection that morning. Holly, she said quietly, sliding into the booth across from us. She placed a thick manila envelope on the table. This is everything I have. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside were papers, photos, and USB drives. Tell me everything, I said. Brittany took a deep breath. It started 8 years ago when I married Kevin, Chad's older brother. Same story. Perfect courtship, dream wedding, then the dramatic public incident. But after my divorce, I noticed something strange in our joint accounts. She pulled out several bank statements pointing to highlighted transactions. Look at these deposits, always right after a wedding or divorce drama, always from shell companies. I started digging, and that's when I found Caroline. Who's Caroline? Ashley asked, leaning forward. Kevin's first wife. Same pattern. And before her there were others, with their cousins, their business partners. The Browns don't just marry for love, they marry for profit. They target women with either money or reputation, create a huge public scandal, then destroy them through lawsuits and blackmail. My coffee sat forgotten as I flipped through more documents, photos of other weddings. Other brides' news clippings about lawsuits, bank records show millions of dollars changing hands. But here's where it gets worse. Brittany continued, lowering her voice. They're not just con artists. They're running a massive fraud scheme through their family business. These weddings, they're just a cover while everyone's focused on the drama. They're moving money, lots of it. She pulled out her phone and showed us a video. It was Bernice talking to someone off camera. "Make sure it happens at the reception." Her voice was clear in the recording. "Holly's family has connections in the media. Once this goes public, their reputation will be ruined. The lawsuit will be easy." I felt sick. They planned everything down to the last detail. Brittany nodded. "But Holly, you did something they didn't expect. You walked away. You didn't beg or make a scene. You kept your dignity. And now we have a chance to stop them." Ashley, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. "We need to be careful. These people are dangerous." Brittany's face darkened. "Trust me, I know. After I started investigating, my car was broken into, my house was vandalized. They tried to have me committed, claiming I was mentally unstable." "So what do we do?" I asked, staring at the mountain of evidence in front of me. "We build a case," Brittany said firmly. "I have a contact at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He's been wanting to investigate the Browns for years, but they needed solid evidence and a credible witness. Together, we can bring them down." As I sat there looking at the proof of their crimes spread across the cafe table, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about justice, about stopping them from hurting anyone else. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady. "But we need to be smart about this. They're expecting me to fall apart, to hide in shame, so that's exactly what they're going to see while we work behind the scenes." What we didn't realize at the time was that our decision that day would trigger a sequence of events that not only exposed the Browns, but also revealed one of the most significant financial fraud schemes the city had ever witnessed. For the next 2 weeks, I played my part to perfection. I stayed home, ignored all calls, and let people assume I was falling apart. Ashley even helped spread rumors about my emotional breakdown, exactly what the Browns wanted to hear. But behind closed doors, we were working tirelessly. Brittany, Ashley, and I turned my apartment into a strategy hub. Papers covered every surface, timelines sprawled across the walls, and we spent countless hours combing through every shred of evidence. "Look at this," Brittany said one evening, spreading out more documents on the kitchen table. Every time they orchestrated a wedding scandal, they made a huge business deal right after. While everyone was focused on the gossip, they were moving millions through their company. I stared at my laptop screen, scanning through old news articles. "I found another one," I called out, my voice trembling. "Remember Jessica Peters? She was supposed to marry their cousin Michael in 2019. Same story, public humiliation at the wedding, followed by lawsuits. She moved to another country afterward." Ashley, who was juggling her regular job during the day and helping us at night, walked in carrying takeout bags. "I've got something too," she said, pulling out her phone. "My friend at the courthouse helped me access public records. The Browns have filed 17 lawsuits against former brides or their families in the last decade." 17 women, I whispered, feeling sick. How had they gotten away with this for so long? Brittany looked up from the papers, her expression hard. "Money, power, and fear. Most of the victims were too embarrassed or scared to fight back. The few who tried were crushed by their legal team." Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Chad. After 10 days of silence, he was finally calling. I put the phone on speaker and gave the others a silent signal to stay quiet. "Holly." His voice was soft, apologetic. "Baby, please talk to me. What happened at the wedding?" "I'm so sorry. I wasn't myself. Mom told me everything, how you threatened her, how you've been spreading lies about our family." I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from screaming. Ashley squeezed my hand, offering her silent support. "The lawyers think we can work this out," Chad continued. "Just come meet with us. We can fix this." Taking a deep breath, I replied in my best broken voice, I need more time, Chad. I'm not ready." "Of course, baby. Take all the time you need. Just don't talk to anyone about what happened, okay? For both our sakes." After hanging up, I looked at Brittany. "Are they making their move?" I asked. She nodded. "This is good. While they think you're vulnerable, we can keep gathering evidence. But Holly, her face turned serious. We need to move faster. They won't wait forever. That's when Ashley came up with an idea that would change everything. What if we set a trap? She said, her eyes lighting up. Give them exactly what they want, a chance to manipulate and threaten Holly, but this time we'll be ready. The plan started taking shape. We would need hidden cameras, recording devices, and most importantly, we would need help from someone on the inside. That's when I remembered Martha the Brown's longtime housekeeper, who had given me a sympathetic look right after the slap. She sees everything, I said, and I don't think she likes what they do. What we didn't know was that Martha wouldn't just help us. She would give us the final piece of evidence we needed to bring the entire Brown empire crashing down. Approaching Martha wasn't easy. The Browns monitored all their staff closely, but Ashley noticed she shopped at the local farmer's market every Saturday morning. That's where I found her pretending to look at tomatoes while my heart pounded in my chest. Martha, I whispered, not looking directly at her. She stiffened but kept examining vegetables. I need your help. I could lose my job, she murmured back, moving to the next stall. I have kids in college. I know about the others, I said softly. Caroline, Jessica, Brittany. How many more have there been that we don't know about? Martha's hands trembled slightly as she picked up an apple too many. I've worked for them for 15 years, seen too much the crying brides, the threats, the late-night meeting. She paused. Bernice's office, that's where they keep everything, the real records. My heart skipped a beat. The office is locked, isn't it? Yes, but Martha glanced around nervously. She keeps the key in a false bottom drawer in the kitchen on Tuesday nights. They have their family dinner at the country club. The house is empty except for me. That conversation set our plan in motion the next Tuesday. While the Browns were enjoying their weekly family dinner, Brittany, Ashley, and I sat in a car down the street from their mansion. Martha had let us in through the service entrance. Remember, Brittany whispered, checking our hidden cameras. We need concrete evidence, bank records, emails, anything that proves the fraud. The house was huge and eerily quiet as we followed Martha upstairs. My hands shook as she retrieved the key from its hiding place. Bernice's office was exactly what you'd expect, all dark wood and expensive artwork. But it was what we found inside that made my blood run cold. Filing cabinets full of documents. Each drawer is labeled with a woman's name. Previous victims. My name was on the newest folder inside, were details about my family, my job, and my finances. They'd been planning this for years, long before Chad even met me. Look at this! Ashley gasped, opening Bernice's laptop. Martha had given us the password emails to their lawyers, planning each wedding disaster. They've got scripts planned, reactions, everything. But the real shock came when we found the hidden safe behind a painting inside were USB drives, each containing videos, recordings of them planning their schemes, laughing about their victims, counting their money. Got you, I whispered, copying everything we could find. Suddenly, Ashley's phone buzzed. They're leaving the club early. Martha's text read, "Get out now." We scrambled to put everything back exactly as we found it. Our hearts racing. Just as we slipped out the service door, we saw headlights turning into the driveway. Safe in our car, we looked at each other, breathing hard. Did we get enough? I asked. Brittany was already scrolling through the files on her laptop. We got more than enough, but Holly... She looked up at me, her face serious. What's on these drives? It's bigger than just wedding scams. They're involved in international money laundering. This is going to be huge. What we didn't realize then was that we just pulled the first thread that would unravel not just the Brown scheme, but an entire criminal empire, and they had no idea what was coming. Back at my apartment, we spread out our findings across the floor. The more we dug through the files, the bigger and scarier this whole thing became. What we thought was just a cruel family-running wedding scams turned out to be the tip of the iceberg. Look at these transactions, Brittany pointed to her laptop screen. They're using the wedding scandals as cover for moving huge amounts of money. Every time there's public drama, they're quietly transferring millions through their charity foundation. Ashley, who worked in finance, leaned in closer. These numbers don't make sense for a family business. They moving money for other people, dangerous people. My hands trembled as I opened another file. Guys, I called out, my voice shaking. I found something about Chad. Inside was a spreadsheet, a list of women, their professions, family connections, and net worth. My name was there, along with notes about my family's media connections. Perfect target for Phase 3 expansion. I read aloud, father's media contacts, crucial for next stage. They weren't just targeting me, they were planning to use my family's connections. Just then, my phone lit up with a text from Chad. Missing you, baby mom's worried about you. Latone talk tomorrow. They're getting impatient, Brittany warned. We need to move fast before they suspect anything. Ashley grabbed her notebook. Okay, what exactly do we have? Latone list. It evidence of planned wedding scandals, proof of money laundering, the lists of previous victims, banking records showing fraud videos of them planning everything, Martha's witness statement. But how do we use it? I asked. If we go to the police, they'll just use their connections to bury it. Brittany finally smiled, a glint of confidence returning to her. That's why we're not going to the police just yet. Remember my FBI contact? He's been building a case against their bigger operation for months. We just handed him the missing pieces. So, what's the next move? Ashley asked, her voice filled with concern. I stood up, looking at the piles of evidence scattered across the living room floor. We give them exactly what they want, a broken, scared ex who's ready to negotiate. But this time, we'll be recording everything. The plan came together quickly. I would agree to meet with Chad and Bernice at their house, wearing a hidden camera. The FBI would be listening in, ready to catch them incriminating themselves. But first, we needed to make them believe I was desperate. Call him back, Brittany advised, her tone serious. Sound weak, emotional, make them think they've won. With trembling hands, I dialed Chad's number. He picked up on the first ring. Chad, I said, forcing my voice to crack. I think I'm ready to talk. Baby, that's great. His voice dripped with fake concern. Mom and I have been so worried. Come over tomorrow and we can sort this whole thing out. As I hung up, Ashley hugged me tight. Are you sure about this? It's dangerous. I touched the fading bruise on my cheek, remembering the coldness in Chad's eyes when he hit me. They've hurt too many women. It ends with me. What we didn't know at the time was that the Browns had their own plans for our meeting plans that would force us to think fast and put everything on the line. The next morning, I dressed carefully, a simple black dress, minimal makeup, and my hair pulled back. I needed to look defeated. The FBI had fitted me with a tiny camera disguised as a necklace pendant and a matching earring with a microphone. Remember, Miller Torres had said during our briefing, we need them to explicitly talk about the fraud, get them to admit to planning the wedding incident and the financial schemes. Now, standing at the Browns' front door, my heart was pounding so hard I was afraid the microphone might pick it up. Chad opened the door, his face a perfect mask of concern. Holly, sweetheart, he said, reaching for me. But I flinched away, refusing to act this time. Come in, Mom's waiting in the study. I followed him inside, my mind racing. Bernice sat like a queen in her expensive leather chair, the same room where we had uncovered all their evidence just days ago. My eyes flickered to the painting that concealed the safe, now empty, thanks to us. Sit down, dear, Bernice said, her voice honey-sweet. You look terrible. This whole situation has been so unfortunate. I perched on the edge of the couch, playing with my necklace nervously. I don't understand what happened. Everything was perfect. Well, Bernice leaned forward. Latone talk about making this right. Our lawyers have drawn up some papers if you sign them agreeing not to discuss what happened, and withdrawing any accusations about Chad's reaction, we can make sure you're well compensated. Compensated? I whispered, encouraging her to continue. Chad sat next to me too close. It's a generous offer, Holly, more than fair, just like we did with the others. Bernice's sharp voice cut him off. A flash of anger crossed her face before the sweet smile returned. What my son means is we want to be fair the others. I looked up, letting tears fill my eyes. You mean this has happened before? The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Bernice's smile turned cold. Listen carefully. Holly, you have two choices. Sign the papers and walk away with a nice settlement, or, she shrugged, face the consequences. Are you threatening me? Of course not, dear, but remember we have evidence of you attacking me at the wedding. Your unstable behavior, your false accusations. It would be a shame if that affected your father's media company, wouldn't it? Got them. The threat was exactly what we needed, but then Chad grabbed my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. Stop playing games, Holly, he growled. Sign the papers or we'll destroy you just like all the others do. You think Caroline or Brittany could stand against us? We crush them. Chad Bernice warned, but he was too angry to stop. You are perfect for this, he continued. Your family connections, your reputation, everything we needed for the next phase. The wedding scandal was just the beginning. Suddenly the door burst open. Miller Torres led a team of FBI Millers into the room. That's enough, Chad and Bernice Brown, you're under arrest. The look on their faces, shock turning to rage, was something I'll never forget. As the Browns were led away in handcuffs, Bernice turned to me, her composure finally cracking. You little, she snarled, her voice dripping with venom. You have no idea what you've done. But I did know. I had stopped them from hurting anyone else. The weeks following their arrest were a whirlwind. News of their crimes exploded across local media, and soon national networks picked it up. The Browns' wedding scam empire was exposed, and headlines flooded the news. I sat in my living room with Ashley and Brittany, watching the coverage. 17 victims identified, the reporter announced. The Browns' scheme involved orchestrating dramatic wedding scandals to cover massive financial fraud operations. Look at this, Ashley said, holding up her phone. More women are coming forward. The Browns didn't just target brides, they ran similar schemes through their charity events and business partnerships. Brittany squeezed my hand. You did it, Holly. You did what none of us could. But it wasn't over yet. The trial was the hardest part. Sitting in that courtroom, feeling Chad's cold stare as I testified, and seeing Bernice's face turn to stone as I detailed their schemes backed by the mountain of evidence we had gathered. Ms. Collins, their lawyer attempted to undermine my testimony. Isn't it true that you broke into the Browns' home to steal private documents? I sat straight, my voice unwavering. No, I was invited in by their housekeeper, Martha, who was tired of watching them destroy innocent lives. Everything we had found proved their long history of exploitation. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank records showing millions in laundered money, videos of them planning their schemes, and Martha's testimony about years of witnessing their crimes. One by one, other victims came forward to share similar stories. The day the verdict was read, the courtroom was packed. Guilty on all counts, the judge announced. Chad and Bernice's perfect facades finally shattered completely. This isn't over, Bernice screamed as they were led away. But it was over. They were sentenced to 15 years in prison, their assets frozen, and their empire crumbled. Standing outside the courthouse with Ashley and Brittany, I felt lighter than I had in a long time. What now? Ashley asked. I looked at the group of women who had testified with us, our bond formed through this ordeal. Now we heal, I said, and we help others. And that's exactly what we did. Together with Brittany and other survivors, we started a support network for victims of fraud and domestic abuse. We named it Phoenix Rising because, like the mythical bird, we had all risen from the ashes of what the Browns had tried to destroy. 1 year later, I stood in front of a room full of women at our first Phoenix Rising conference. Your story isn't over just because someone tried to write your ending, I told them. You can always write a new chapter. And looking out at those faces and seeing the hope replacing the fear in their eyes, I realized something. The Browns hadn't destroyed me. They had helped me find my strength, my purpose. That horrible wedding day hadn't ended my story. It had started a whole new one. Ashley found me after my speech. Who would have thought, she smiled, that slap at your wedding would lead to all this? I touched the necklace around my neck, no longer a camera, just a simple phoenix pendant. Sometimes the worst moments lead us exactly where we need to be. As I drove home that evening, I thought about that terrified bride in her wedding dress, and how far I had come. The Browns had tried to break me, but instead they had made me unbreakable. And now, I was helping others find their strength too. That's the thing about hitting rock bottom. The only way left is up. And sometimes, when you rise, you help lift others with you. Can you still stand tall when everything you thought was true shatters? And how far are you willing to go to make sure no one else falls into the same trap? What began as a fairy tale wedding quickly unraveled into a nightmare, not because of anything I could control, but because of the manipulative, dangerous game played by my now ex-fiancé, Chad, and his mother, Bernice. They orchestrated a series of public humiliations as part of a larger scheme to target women for financial gain. As the truth came out, it wasn't just about the betrayal, it was about exposing a web of lies and fraud that spanned years. With the help of Brittany and Ashley, I gathered enough evidence to bring them down, but not without first enduring the deepest betrayals and threats imaginable. From a perspective of resilience, Holly's transformation throughout the story is incredible. At first, she's just a bride excited for the future, and by the end, she's become a fierce advocate for justice, exposing not just personal betrayal, but an elaborate, financially driven scheme. Holly's courage to stand up to Chad and Bernice, and ultimately to fight back with evidence rather than retreat into shame, is what makes her story so empowering. She takes control of her narrative, turning her painful experience into a catalyst for positive change, not just for herself, but for other women who had been victims of the Browns' manipulations. What does it take to turn a devastating personal betrayal into an opportunity for growth and justice? And can we find healing in helping others who've been hurt just like we have? Have you ever had to turn a heartbreaking situation into something empowering? What did you do to reclaim control? Share your story below. Your strength might just inspire someone else to find theirs.
Hi there, I'm Priscilla, and I'm 28 years old. My childhood was marked by tragedy as I lost my parents in a car accident when I was very young. With no relatives to care for me, I ended up in an orphanage. After 4 years, I was fortunate enough to be adopted by a couple who turned out to be multimillionaires. They didn't want to make my adoption a big deal, so they kept it hushed up. They wanted to do good without it having been broadcast everywhere. When I turned into an adult and had my own place, the two of them decided that they wanted to expand their business further and took to touring Europe in search of opportunities. It was around this time that I met Brock, my now ex-husband. We met in college and instantly liked each other. After a couple of conversations, Brock was a very happy-go-lucky, caring man that made me like him a whole lot more. Our dates led to us becoming an official couple. We had the perfect relationship, although there was one problem. It was no secret that Brock's family did not like me. By that, I mean we should both get good jobs. Brock had warned me that his parents tended to be a little judgmental when it came to their children's significant others, and he wanted me to have the best impression I could. I didn't mind, because if I was being completely honest, I hated meeting the parents. It was a nerve-wracking thing, and if I had the option to delay it, I would choose it over and over again. By the time Brock had introduced me to his parents, we had been dating for a good 5 years. In those 5 years, we'd also gotten engaged, so I guessed that in itself would be a problem for his parents, considering they didn't even accept me as his girlfriend. I remember how worried Brock and I were about that the day before we were supposed to meet his parents. "They're going to hate me, Brock," I said, my voice tinged with worry. Brock squeezed my hand reassuringly. "They won't, I promise you." "Do you not think that they'll be shocked to find out that we're engaged?" I asked, my anxiety palpable. "Well, yeah, but I don't think it will be that big of a deal," Brock replied calmly. "Are you being serious right now?" I exclaimed incredulously. "You were scared about introducing me to them because you know how judgy they are, and you think introducing me as your fiancé is not going to make them judge me even more?" "Look, even if they do, will what they say really matter?" Brock countered. "It won't to me, but I don't know about you. You always seem so careful about them," he continued. "I promise you that it won't affect or matter to me at all," I answered. "All right, if you say so," Brock acquiesced. But do you think maybe we should just not tell them we're engaged, and then like a month or so later we should tell them? I asked hesitantly. Will that make you feel any better about this whole thing? Brock asked rhetorically. I don't have a problem with either option. I think we should hide it just in case. I'll do anything to get on their good side, I admitted. You have nothing to worry about. I'll be there with you no matter what, Brock said. Thanks, sweetie, I said gratefully. The only reason I had been freaking out so much was because whenever I suggested that Brock tell his parents about me, he would make a whole fuss about them not going to approve of me. Now at this point, I began to kind of understand why. You see, Brock's family were pretty rich, and they loved to live lavishly. They wanted that for their children as well. And the only way they accepted their children dating was if they also mingled with people who were as rich or even richer than them. The way I was living back then was by no means rich according to their standards. I hadn't told Brock about my family because I didn't see the point of it. Plus, by the time I figured out why he was so adamant about not letting me introduce myself to his parents, I felt like it was even more unnecessary for them to know just who my father was. I wanted them to like me for me and not for my money. I naively believed that they would like me that way, but oh boy was I wrong. We decided to meet Brock's parents at a fine dining restaurant. At that time, Brock held my hand as we walked in. I wore my engagement ring on my necklace because I wanted to keep it on me without actually drawing any attention to it. When we got to our table, his parents already looked upset. Brock told me to expect that because they were big sticklers about time. When we had arrived exactly 3 minutes late, well, we were already off to a bad start. His parents gave me a once-over and twisted their faces into disgust. They proceeded to ignore me for a little while as they made conversation with Brock. I will admit I felt really small in their eyes. The longer they ignored my presence, the stronger my urge grew to leave. I kept my head down for the most part until finally Brock drew his parents' attention towards me. Mom, Dad, we can't just keep talking like this. This is my wonderful girlfriend, Priscilla. Oh, hello, it's a pleasure to meet both of you, I said. Hi, I wish I could say the same, Brock's mom grumbled reluctantly. Mom, what? Brock indignation. I'm only speaking the truth, she continued. So, Priscilla, I heard you and Brock met in college, is that right? Yes, we did. We happened to share some classes together, I noted. And how did you manage to attend this college? From what I know, the tuition is pretty high and it's a pretty hard place to get into. Brock's dad joined the conversation. Dad, that's enough. Brock continued to resent his parents' inquiries. Brock, you will not speak to your father that way, Mom intervened. He's asking a very valid question. Priscilla, please answer him, she continued. Well, I got a full ride there. I'm super grateful I got to go there because not only did I get to learn a lot of things, but I also got to meet Brock, which has been one of the best things that has happened to me, I replied. Of course, it's one of the best things that's happened to you. He's a loaded and you need his money. At least you have some brains because your looks aren't all that good, Brock's mom confidently stated. You know what? That's enough. We're leaving. Come on, Priscilla. Brock couldn't take it anymore. Brock grabbed my hand and we walked out. I was in shock at the way his parents had treated me. I couldn't believe people could be so mean so openly into someone's face. I was too stunned to even feel anything. The car ride back home was silent because Brock was fuming. When we reached home, Brock made sure I was okay. But honestly, at that moment, I didn't know how to feel. I had dressed up nicely and behaved properly. I hadn't ordered anything expensive, yet Coraline and Gatlin had already made their judgment about me. Brock didn't speak to his parents for a while after that. They texted him and told him that we had been very disrespectful by walking out on them during lunch. Brock didn't respond to that, and only texted them about a month later to tell them that he had gotten engaged. His parents weren't too happy about it, but Brock threatened them with no contact if they said or did anything against me. They offered to pay for our wedding on the condition that they got to make all the decisions regarding it. Obviously, neither Brock nor I wanted that, so we decided to do the next best thing, elope. My parents were in Europe and they knew about me eloping. They were just happy that I was happy, and they did send Brock and me a gift. Brock did raise his brows at how they sent us a pretty expensive painting as a gift, but I just brushed it off as them having enough money to spend it on that. After getting married, we next met Coraline and Gatlin at a party that they had hosted. They invited us to celebrate their anniversary. Truth be told, I was actually pretty happy that they had invited me despite the dislike they held for me. When we got there, I was ignored by everyone. If you think being ignored by 2 people was embarrassing, being ignored by about 40 people was even worse. I hung by Brock's side for the most part, but nobody even tried to talk to me. If I ever did try to speak and make conversation, people would just either look me up and down and walk away, or they would continue talking to Brock as if I never said anything. By the end of the night, I was in tears. I was humiliated and downright disgusted by the behavior that everyone was showing. The crowd had asked Coraline and Gatlin to make a speech at the end of the night, and they got up to make one. By this time, I was tired and I wanted to go home. But in their speech, they began by talking about how grateful they were to have almost everyone in the room in their lives. That was only the first jab that they threw at me. They kept making many more, which the guests kept laughing at. At some point, I just got up and walked out. I ordered an Uber and went back home. I cried the entire way back home and up until Brock got back home. When he got back, he seemed upset and angry. "Why did you walk out like that? Do you know how embarrassing that was for me?" Brock tried to take umbrage. What? What are you talking about?" I was surprised. "Don't play dumb with me right now, Priscilla. I had to endure my parents yelling at me and a lot of the guests pitying me for being with you." "Are you serious? What about how embarrassing it was for me?" I didn't hide my displeasure. "Oh, come on, Priscilla. You could deal with it for one night. It was my parents' anniversary, for God's sake." "I was ignored by everyone, and your parents chose to make even more fun of me in their toast. How do you possibly expect me to be okay with something like that?" "I'm not saying what they did was right, but you could have just lived through it. I would have spoken to them about it after." Brock tried to make excuses for his parents. "What would that have done for me? I don't like being put in positions where I'm only being humiliated. Everyone was laughing at me. You've never been in that position before, so it's easy for you to talk about this like it's no big deal," I uttered. "My parents expect an apology from you. I want one too," Brock continued. "I'm afraid that I won't be doing that. I'll only do that if they give me one too. As for your apology, I see no reason for apologizing to you. You always stood up for me. I don't see why this is any different," I replied. "This is very different because unlike before, you humiliated my family in front of all our guests," Brock argued. "Your parents humiliated me, your wife, in front of all their guests," I justified. "Maybe my parents were right about you. You're impossible," he finished. With that, Brock went to sleep in the guest bedroom. I couldn't understand why he'd had a sudden change of behavior. Was it really that bad for him after I walked out? He was always the first to stick up for me, especially considering the fact that he was usually sick of everything his parents said about me. The fact that I left should have been the clearest indication of how bad they were being to me, but Brock didn't seem to care about that. Brock didn't talk to me for the next week. I also got a lot of texts from his parents calling me ungrateful and an embarrassment. I tried to talk to Brock, but he refused to. Eventually, I decided to give in and apologize to both him and his parents. Even that felt humiliating, but I was willing to go through it because I loved Brock and I didn't want this to be the hill I died on. Things after that only got worse for me. Brock's parents retired and spent a lot of their time hosting family dinners. They hosted it once a week, and Brock was always invited. The first time they hosted it, Brock brought me along with him to their house. As soon as I stepped in, the atmosphere in the room got awkward. Coraline was busy getting ready, so she didn't see me immediately, but Gatlin and the rest of Brock's siblings awkwardly glanced at me. They didn't talk to me, and Brock left me to stand by myself while he caught up with the rest of his family. When Coraline came downstairs, she saw me and practically flew over to me in rage. "What are you doing here?" she exclaimed. "Excuse me," I replied. "No, I will not excuse you. What are you doing in my house right now?" she continued. "Well, you invited us for dinner," I said. "Wrong. I invited Brock because it's a family dinner," she uttered. "I'm Brock's wife, so I'm a part of this family, am I not?" I wondered. "Absolutely not. An orphan like you deserves no space in this family." I could sense the anger in her voice. "What? You thought you could hide the detail from us? We do background checks on our children's spouses, and you are not in my son's league whatsoever. I will never accept you here, she finished. Why not? That can't be the only thing that determines whether I get to be a part of your family, I resented. You're ugly and poor. You'd never fit into our elite circles. I never want to see you again, she spewed. Why are you being so superficial? Are you scared that I'll damage your reputation just by existing? Does the fact that I bring your son happiness not satisfy you? I asked. If happiness brought in money, a lot of people would be billionaires. This is exactly why you'd never fit in with us, she continued. Or maybe I'll just never be as superficial as the rest of you because I value who a person actually is. You never even took the chance to get to know me before casting your judgments on me. I was angry. That's enough. Here's some money. Get yourself an Uber and leave, Brock interrupted, holding out money. I stared at Brock in shock as he shoved the money into my hands and turned back towards his mother, who smirked at me. Tears sprang into my eyes as I turned back around and walked out. I was once again crying in the Uber. I didn't understand why Brock had changed so drastically. Was this his way of making up to his parents after the party? Whatever it was, I was hurt and angry at him. He was okay with his parents using my past as an insult and defending them instead of me like he usually did. I wanted to yell and scream, but I knew that would only project a worse image of me and prove them right, which is why I walked away. I tried to think if anything I said was out of line, but I really did not see anything wrong. I was merely standing up for myself calmly, might I add. After Brock came back home, he went back to not talking to me. My heart was breaking, and I felt so alone. I knew that he expected another apology, but I couldn't bring myself to do it like the last time. Coraline had blatantly insulted me in the worst way, and Brock was angry at me for it. If anything, I expected an apology from him. For the next 2 weeks, Brock and I didn't speak to each other. It was hard at first, but I got used to it. Eventually, the dinners his family hosted still happened, and about once a week I was all alone at home, which I truthfully did not mind. On one of those nights, my parents video called me. "Hey honey, how's it going?" my mom asked. "Hey dad, hey mom, things are not good," I said. "Why? What's wrong?" parents asked. "If you need help with anything, feel free to ask us," they continued. "I don't think this is something you guys would be able to help me out with, but thanks for the offer," I responded. "Where's Brock? Is he not helping?" they asked. "That's the thing. He's part of the problem," I sighed. "Huh? Sweetie, could you be a little more clear about what the problem is?" "Well, his parents are pretty wealthy and also very snobby," I explained. "Oh, I hate those kinds of people. Tell me about it," Mom said. "Anyways, they thought that I was some poor girl who could never live up to their standards and fit into their elite circles. So they took it upon themselves to humiliate me every time that I met them," I explained. "What the hell?" my dad exclaimed. "Oh yeah. And the last time I went over, Brock's mom decided calling me an orphan was a good insult. That woman! I'm going to claw her face off. How dare she call my precious child an orphan? Do they not know about us? And what the hell has Brock been doing in all this? I didn't tell them about you guys because I knew that their opinion of me would change if they knew, and I wanted them to like me for who I was and not for my wealth. As for Brock, he's siding with them. He thinks that I was disrespectful when I stood up for myself. Honey, are you sure this is the man you want to be with? Mom asked. I love him a lot, but this is not how I want it to be. We haven't been speaking to each other for the last 2 weeks, and I'm surprisingly okay with that. We can provide you with the best lawyer. Just say the word, my mom offered. Okay, I think I will need your help with that actually. I'm tired of all this, I replied. All right, sweetie, I'll get you in touch with one of my friends over there. As for your worry about us not being able to help you out, I think we might actually be able to help you get a little sweet revenge, Mom said with enthusiasm. What do you mean? I said I don't understand. Your dad and I are coming there next week. We wanted to take you and Brock on a vacation, but now we can just take you. More things for us to do together, I guess, Mom uttered. Really? Oh my God, I'm so excited to finally get to see the two of you in person again. That was a real pick-me-up. Finally, I felt happy after so long. The three of us continued to talk for a little while after that. Dad elaborated on his plan to help me. After a little while, he asked me where these dinners of theirs were being held. As far as I knew, they took turns hosting in their house and at restaurants. Conveniently, the week that my parents were coming, the dinner was going to happen in a restaurant. I needed to get information on where exactly this dinner was going to be held, so I could provide my parents with the location. Thankfully, I had Brock's email logged into my phone, and if there was one thing I knew about Coraline and Gatlin, it was that they loved to email everyone everything. It wasn't that hard to get the location, and I gave it to my parents. At the same time, my mom's lawyer friend contacted me, and we got started on the process of filing for divorce. My parents landed in the States and decided to check into their hotel, where I met them. We had lunch together, and then they sent me to the spa, which they paid for in full. My parents thought I deserved it as I prepared to get back at my in-laws. My parents walked into the restaurant that Brock and his family were at. According to Dad, when they approached the table, Gatlin and Coraline began to murmur among themselves as they recognized just who he was. Mom told me that this was how the conversation went. "Hello, oh my gosh, Mr. Jacobs, what brings you here?" Coraline exclaimed. "Wow, I just happened to see some familiar faces and I figured that I could drop in and probably dine with you," Dad replied. "Familiar faces," Dad said. "Who are you speaking about, Mr. Jacobs?" Gatlin asked. "I see Brock," Dad continued. "Me?" Brock was dumbfounded. Well, hello, a pleasure to meet you. My daughter has spoken a lot about you. But speaking of my daughter, where is she?" Dad asked. "Your daughter? I'm afraid you're mistaken. I don't think she's here," Brock said without hiding his surprise. "But she should be, right?" Dad insisted. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jacobs, but we didn't even know that you had a daughter," Coraline exclaimed. "Of course I do, and she's married to Brock," Dad continued. "What? I'm sorry, but I think you're mistaken," Coraline genuinely surprised. "I don't think so. His wife's name is Priscilla, and she was an orphan. That's why my wife and I adopted her." My dad stunned everyone here. "Excuse me?" Brock sighed. "You're her dad?" "Yes, and from what I see, she isn't here. She's been telling me that there have been some problems with her in-laws, but I see what the problem was. It was you," Dad said firmly. "No, she hid this huge detail of her life from us. If we had known, I would have treated her better," Brock excused himself. "She didn't want you to treat her nicely because of her background," Dad said. "Oh, well, she did ask me to hand this over to you." My dad handed Brock the divorce papers and walked out. After that, it only took a couple of phone calls for a lot of investors to pull away from Gatlin's business. They were quickly crashing, and nothing was more satisfying than watching them crumble down to the levels that they made fun of. I got a lot of texts from all Brock's family calling me a bunch of nasty names, while some of them begged me to talk to my dad and reverse what he had done. Brock thankfully signed the divorce papers without any hassle. My parents and I went on a long vacation after that. I was having the best time of my life and slowly starting to heal. Yeah, it hurt that I had lost the love of my life, but I also learned just how important it is to stand up for myself. I'm forever grateful to my parents for everything they've done for me, and I can't wait to see what else life has to offer me. A decade ago, Greg, my ex-husband, spewed venomous words that still echo in my memory. "Women her age are clearly superior. As an older woman, you're embarrassing to talk to. I regret marrying someone as immature as Greg. If only I could turn back time, I'd redo my life." My name is Zoe, aged 47. At 32, I tied the knot with Greg, who was 5 years my junior. We met at the hospital where I work as a nurse, and he had just completed his medical internship. Despite our age gap and differing professional roles, Greg's eagerness to seek my advice and his innocence drew me towards him. Our daily conversations gradually evolved into a romantic relationship. Initially apprehensive about our age difference, I found solace in Greg's nonchalance towards it. 2 years into our relationship, we exchanged vows. However, after 4 years of marriage, Greg's demeanor changed, and he began hurling hurtful remarks, expressing his regret at not marrying a younger woman. He openly flirted with young nurses at the hospital, a behavior I chose to ignore until the day I discovered his infidelity with a former patient, a woman 9 years my junior, already carrying his child. His laughter as he justified his affair pierced me deeply. Unable to tolerate his betrayal, I agreed to a divorce and sought alimony. Naturally, this decision enraged Greg, who believed he should be rewarded for enduring our marriage. His father's indifference to his son's wrongdoing added insult to injury, with Greg adamantly refusing to pay. Reluctantly, I sought legal assistance. Enduring hurtful remarks during our marriage and facing his infidelity, I refused to back down. Silently, with the lawyer's guidance, I rightfully received the alimony I deserved. We parted ways, and I began living alone, terminating our shared apartment lease. Greg's departure to a new hospital came with more insults, leaving behind judgmental whispers that plagued me. The constant gossip eventually took a toll on my mental well-being, prompting my decision to leave the hospital. After a period of aimless drifting, realizing my love for both work and physical activity, I actively sought out a new professional environment. Fortunately, a small maternity clinic just 2 blocks away from my current residence was hiring nurses. Following the interview, I was immediately welcomed into the team. Despite the clinic's minimal staff of both doctors and nurses, the atmosphere felt warm and inviting, conducive to providing excellent care for patients. During one of the clinic's relatively calm days, a pregnant woman referred from another hospital arrived for her appointment. Upon hearing her name, which happened to be the same as Greg's affair partner, I couldn't help but wonder if it was just a coincidence. Confirming her husband's name as Greg, a doctor, it became undeniable that she was indeed my ex-husband's current spouse. Despite the unexpected encounter, I hesitated to reveal their connection to anyone else. As days passed, I found myself unable to address the situation. Then one day, Greg and his wife came in for a checkup. Greg's eyes widened in surprise upon seeing me, clearly not expecting our paths to cross again. Truthfully, I had hoped to avoid such encounters, especially in a setting like this. "What are you doing here?" Greg's accusatory tone made his wife realize who I was. "Wait, did you come here to harass us?" His words stung, and I struggled to explain that I have been working at the clinic long before knowing of their proximity. Disregarding my explanation, Greg continued his tirade, accusing me of stalking them and causing trouble. Despite being clearly in the wrong, his words drew judgmental stares from those around us, making me feel uncomfortable. Fearing for their safety, Greg's wife feigned distress, insinuating that I posed a threat to her and the baby. With that, the attending physician intervened, urging me to leave the examination room to diffuse the tension. While I understood the necessity of prioritizing the patient's well-being, the encounter left me feeling shaken and unfairly judged. I found myself in a situation I didn't want to be in, feeling utterly miserable with the details of my divorce now known, something I had hoped to keep private. I became acutely aware of the judgmental glances around me. Greg's wife continued to visit the hospital, openly criticizing me, further adding to my discomfort. Despite knowing I was innocent, I felt torn between avoiding upsetting her and respecting her privacy. With over 5 months until her due date, the thought of enduring this environment seemed unbearable. Despite the clinic being a good workplace, I felt compelled to resign. The director's expression hinted at relief, though I couldn't help but wonder why I deserved such treatment. Worn down by everything, I couldn't muster the energy to hunt for another hospital gig, so I retreated to my parents' abode. They greeted me with open arms but sparse words. For a stretch I grappled with finding my purpose, feeling the weight of guilt for merely lounging at home without contributing. Eventually, I opted for a part-time stint at a nearby grocery store. It marked my debut outside the hospital realm, and it felt like a breath of fresh air, a shift in pace. Though I cherished nursing and found it deeply rewarding, the burden of responsibility in a setting where lives hung in the balance was crushing. Being away from that scene proved beneficial for my mental well-being. I endeavored to not be a burden on my folks, striving to stand on my own 2 feet. Looking back, I wished I'd returned home sooner. Around 2 years later, while still dwelling with my parents, an offer to join the grocery store full-time came my way. They acknowledged my diligence, and I was genuinely elated to accept the offer. Over time, I was approached with matchmaking proposals. However, at 44, I had no interest in remarriage, politely declining each time. I was taken aback when the manager insisted the prospective partner was also divorced, akin to my circumstance. Despite my initial reluctance, the offer lingered in my thoughts. I relented to the arranged meeting, considering our shared maturity. We agreed to meet sans intermediaries. Upon reaching the designated restaurant, my matchmaking counterpart was already there. As I entered, he abruptly rose, sending his chair crashing to the ground. His face flushed crimson, yet despite his embarrassment, I couldn't stifle a chuckle. It felt straight out of a novel. "I'm Quentin. Thank you for coming today," he said, composing himself. "Nice to meet you. I'm Zoe," I replied. Perhaps owing to the initial blunder, we swiftly found ourselves at ease. I learned Quentin had stumbled upon our supermarket during a work trip and had been smitten with me at first glance. He'd persuaded the department manager, who happened to be his senior from university, to set up our meeting. "I'd like to pursue a serious relationship if possible," Quentin confessed. I had come prepared to decline, but unexpectedly, I found myself wanting to see him again. After 8 months of dating, we decided to get married. My parents liked Quentin's personality, and they were genuinely happy for us. Our life together, filled with Quentin's care and consideration, was truly blissful. Since we were both older, we hadn't planned to have children from the start. However, when I turned 47, my health took an unexpected turn. I wasn't feeling unwell, I was pregnant. I never imagined I'd be pregnant at this age, and certainly didn't expect my discomfort to be morning sickness. I suspect Quentin felt the same way when I shared the news. "It looks like I'm pregnant," I said. Quentin responded naturally, "That's wonderful. So who's pregnant? Do I know the person?" "Yeah, I think you know her very well. She's right in front of you," I replied, pointing to myself. Quentin looked bewildered, staring at my belly. "Ha, I'm the one who's pregnant," I clarified. He remained silent for a moment, processing the news. Then, with wide eyes, he asked, "Wait, so you mean we'll be parents?" "Yes, it seems that way," I confirmed. "Really?" he exclaimed. "Wow," as he hugged me tightly. "I could hardly believe it. Unbelievable. It's a miracle," I whispered. "Is it okay if I go through with it?" While I had never considered not having the baby, my age was a factor. Thinking about the future made me anxious. Even at the hospital they asked, "What will you do?" I understood the risks of advanced maternal age for both mother and child. Not everyone would agree with our decision. People might question how old we'd be when our child turned 18. The uncertainty of parenting at this age also worried me. Still, I couldn't bear the thought of ending a life that had taken root. "What are you saying?" "Of course it's natural." Quentin's immediate response made me happy. I believed it reflected Quentin's genuine feelings. However, after a while, he started worrying about my health. Even for a man like Quentin, I could imagine the potential challenges. We discussed it thoroughly, and our desire to have the baby remained unchanged. We began preparations with the doctor's guidance. Both our parents were surprised and concerned, but they were genuinely thrilled. And so it was decided that I would give birth at a well-equipped large hospital. The obstetrician was a very caring and competent doctor, which was reassuring. On one of the prenatal checkup days, not only the obstetrician but also an internal medicine doctor came for extra precaution. Quentin was supposed to be there too, but unfortunately, he had urgent work and couldn't make it. So I entered the examination room alone. To my surprise, there was my ex-husband, Greg. Honestly, encountering him again in such a place felt unbelievable. "Ha! Seriously? You're a 47-year-old pregnant woman? It's impossible to give birth at your age," he burst out laughing. The obstetrician and the nurse present both had puzzled expressions, but Greg paid no attention. "You have no right to say such things. I'm just concerned," I retorted. "A grandma getting pregnant? It's gross," he continued. "Is that how you treat patients? Even without the anxiety that pregnant women already face, spewing such hurtful words is unbelievable. And you call yourself a doctor?" I asked. "What are you acting all high and mighty for? Besides, this hospital mostly caters to celebrities. Do you even realize that?" I continued. "It'd be better for you to leave before embarrassing yourself, doctor," Greg said. "I'll leave without being told. Giving birth in a hospital where doctors like you work? No way," I replied. "Yeah, just go, doctor," Greg sneered, pointing towards the door. It's hard to believe a doctor would say such things. Quentin, my husband, walked in just as Greg turned pale. "Sorry for being late. My wife was..." Quentin began, sensing the tension in the room. Observing my angry expression, Greg's pale face, and the overall atmosphere, he stopped mid-sentence. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I was told by this Dr. Greg that it's disgusting to give birth at 47, I explained. Seeing Quentin's concern, his expression changed instantly upon hearing those words. "Greg, you're Greg, right? You insulted my wife." Quentin's voice was stern. Greg stammered, denying the accusation, but Quentin pressed on. "How can you insult a patient like that? What kind of hospital is this? I can't trust this hospital with my precious wife and unborn child," Quentin said. Just then, the nurse who had left earlier returned with the director, Mr. Carter. "I've heard a few rude things said here," director said. "I thought this was a reliable hospital because my father recommended it, but I didn't know they had a doctor like this. It seems I chose the wrong hospital. I'm very sorry," Quentin said. "No, that's not true. This man is not our doctor," the director clarified, surprising us. "I just fired him. I didn't know he was such a person. I just let him in because a friend asked me to. We don't need a doctor who spits out such insults. He'll never appear in front of you again," the director, Mr. Carter, reiterated. "Hey, director, what are you saying?" Greg protested, but the director silenced him. "Shut up and be quiet. You get out of here right now. Don't ever come near our hospital again," the director said. Hearing the director's words, Greg protested, but the obstetrician who was there dragged him out of the hallway. The director apologized profusely, and we regained our composure and sat back down. However, Quentin was still angry. "Did you kick him out because my father donated to this hospital? If not, would you let a doctor like him run wild?" The director shook his head and explained, "Actually, Greg had only been at this hospital for a week. Greg's father was my classmate, and they had a reunion the other day. He asked me to hire his son. I had no idea he was such a person," Mr. Carter continued, and he looked truly sorry. Not all the doctors at this hospital were like Greg. The obstetrician in charge was a very good doctor. "If Greg wasn't there, I would want to give birth here," I said, and Quentin agreed. Quentin's father was the president of a large company with branches all over the country, and he donated part of his profits to medical and welfare facilities. His mother had been seriously ill when she was young and had been taken care of by this hospital, so he donated a lot of money. That's why his father recommended this hospital for my delivery. A few days later, Greg contacted me and begged me to ask the director to hire him back. "If you ask for me, maybe he'll reconsider," he pleaded. Greg had often offended patients with his arrogant attitude and had been hopping from one hospital to another. I couldn't believe he kept making the same mistakes. His father had told him that if he got fired again, he would have no future. But I couldn't help wondering if his father's leniency had made him such a man. Quentin was next to me when Greg called. He snatched the phone from me and yelled at Greg, threatening to report him to the police for harassment if he ever contacted me or came near me again. He must have been scared because he never called again. Sometime later, I stopped by a convenience store on my way back from the hospital and saw Greg working there. Apparently, no hospital would hire him anymore. He was crying his eyes out, saying that his wife and child had left him. But I felt no sympathy for him. I just decided to avoid that convenience store. The following year, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She was so adorable. I vowed to raise her with love and responsibility no matter what. But Quentin was smitten with her from the moment she was born. He seemed to be a very sweet father, so I had to be careful. "I have a new girlfriend and I'm going to live with her, so I'm divorcing you, and you'll need to go stay with your parents," Bo declared. His words hit me like a sudden gust of wind. "I don't understand what you're saying. I thought everything was going well," I stammered. My heart was pounding with confusion and disbelief. "I don't need you anymore. I can leave you with my parents if you want to be a breadwinner or a housekeeper," Bo said it with a cold finality that sent a shiver down my spine. Tears came to my eyes as I tried to comprehend the sudden destruction of my marriage. "Bo, please, I thought we were happy together," I whispered, my voice shaking with excitement. "Wendy, you need to understand. My parents and we're better off without you," Bo said, his tone turning dismissive as if cutting off any further discussion. A whirlwind of emotions raced through my mind. Resentment, betrayal, and disbelief mixed into a raging storm. How could this be happening? Just moments ago I had been happily married, and now my entire world was crashing down around me. My name is Wendy, and I'm a 32-year-old office worker. I've spent my life dedicated to my career. Since college, I've been working for a major company, climbing the ranks through hard work and dedication. Now, I'm a department manager at a young age, surrounded by a motivated team and a supportive boss. But despite my success at work, my personal life has always felt lacking. I had a boyfriend back in my college days, but since entering the workforce, romance has been elusive. That is until a friend hosted a dinner party for me, hoping to change my luck. It's where I met Beau. He was charming, with a warm smile and an easygoing personality. We hit it off right away, bonding over shared interests and experiences. Soon enough, we were going on dates and falling in love. When Beau proposed, I was over the moon. Finally, I had found the man of my dreams, and we wasted no time in tying the knot. But things took a turn when I visited his parents for the first time. They seemed pleasant enough at first, showering me with compliments and welcoming me into their home. But as the conversation turned to my career, things took an unexpected twist. "Wendy, it's wonderful to meet you. You're such a beautiful person, and we're thrilled to have you as Beau's bride," his mother exclaimed. "Yeah, Mom, ease up a bit. You're making Wendy nervous," Beau chimed in, trying to diffuse the situation. But his parents didn't stop there. They delved into whether I planned to continue working after marriage, a topic I hadn't anticipated discussing. "I do plan to keep working," I replied, trying to keep the conversation light. "Well, that's great. It's admirable for a woman to have a career. But will you quit once you're married?" his father asked, a hint of expectation in his tone. Feeling relieved that they weren't pressuring me to leave my job, I replied, "No, I intend to continue working." "That's good to hear. It's important for a woman to be independent," his mother added, seemingly approving of my decision. In that moment, I felt a sense of gratitude towards my future in-laws. Unlike the horror stories I'd heard from friends about demanding mothers-in-law, mine seemed accepting and understanding. Little did I know that perception would soon be shattered. Shortly after meeting Beau's parents, we were married. My heart was filled with excitement for the new married life that was about to begin. My husband moved into the house I was living in, and we started our new married life together. I felt immense joy being newlyweds with the man I deeply adored. The prospect of spending every moment with him, both at home and after work, filled me with bliss. 7 months into our shared life, my husband broached a serious topic. "There's something I want to discuss with you," he began. "I hope you don't mind, but I've been thinking. I want us to live with my parents." "Live together?" I echoed, trying to grasp his suggestion. "Yes," he affirmed, his expression tinged with concern. "They're aging, and I worry about them." Understanding his sentiments, I reflected on my own family dynamics. My parents were of similar age, yet my brother and his wife resided with them, alleviating any worries. However, my husband, being their only child, understandably fretted over his parents' well-being. "So you mean we'd be moving in with your folks?" I sought clarification. "Yes, that's the idea," he replied. "But do they have space for us?" I inquired. "They occupy every room for one reason or another," Beau confessed. "Perhaps we could renovate their house into a 2-family dwelling," he continued. 2 families? I interrogated. His eyes lit up with the realization. Yes, that could work. It'd be more economical than buying a new place, and we'd still have our own space. I found his proposal attractive. Indeed, it's a practical solution. My in-laws, bless them, were amiable souls, and the thought of separate residences lessened any apprehensions I harbored. "Yes, that sounds fine," I replied warmly, sharing in my husband's happiness. When my in-laws visited, their gratitude was palpable. Their warmth and cheerfulness made the idea of dual households seem less daunting. Soon after, my husband and I got busy with a plan to renovate their home. The estimated cost hovered around $200,000, but amidst discussions, my husband dropped a bombshell. "Actually, there's something I need to ask," he began tentatively. "Could you cover the renovation expenses? The entire amount?" I blinked, taken aback. "Yes, you see, we're in debt," he admitted, his discomfort evident. I was stunned. Never once during our courtship or marriage had my husband or his parents alluded to financial troubles. "How much debt are we talking about?" I inquired, my voice laced with disbelief. About $170,000, he revealed. My shock morphed into disbelief. What? I thought it might be a few tens of thousands, but that's a significant sum, I exclaimed, my emotions spiraling. The burden of the debt loomed large, especially considering my parents' limited income. Repayment seemed daunting, and the debt only seemed to swell with time. I see. I could not hide my surprise and upset at the sudden and shocking revelation. Wendy, I need a favor. Will you help me pay off my father and father-in-law's debt? They can't afford it anymore, and I don't make a very good salary either, my husband pleaded. Then isn't it going to be tough to renovate the house and live together as two families? I asked. No, that's important, so let's go ahead as planned, Bo replied. You are asking me to pay for the repairs and your father's debt. I'm on the hook for $370000. I know. I'm talking about difficult things, but I want to take care of my life with you, and I want to protect my mom and dad. It's because I love both my parents and you. I'm sorry I'm being greedy, but if you really love me, please help me. I'll pay you back little by little. I was very distressed. My husband and my in-laws had no one to turn to but me, and I knew that my husband really loved me. But at that time, I was completely deceived by my husband's words. Love is blind, I think, and that is exactly what it is. Okay, I'll pay for it. I agreed to do so. Then my husband said, "Thank you so much," and he shook my hand and thanked me very much. He told my parents-in-law, and later they came to our house and apologized to me. My mother-in-law even shed tears of joy. I have to do my best from now on. I had to take over my in-laws' debt, and I was determined to do it. However, although I had some savings, I was afraid to pay it all at once. So for now, I decided to pay about $50,000 from my savings and then pay the rest in installments. Then my in-laws joined us and we talked about repayment. I explained to my in-laws about the installments I had just made. They said that I could do whatever I wanted. Then why don't you transfer the money directly to the account for debt repayment? I asked. We're not very good at managing money, and I'm a little afraid to transfer a lot of money. When my husband said this, my parents-in-law nodded. Indeed, it would be time-consuming for me to transfer the money to my parents-in-law's account, and then for them to transfer it to their repayment account. And since it was a large sum, I would not like it if the money was not transferred in the middle of the process. So I agreed to that. Once the conversation was settled, my parents-in-law looked very relieved. Now we don't have to be afraid of the monthly debt collection. That has been really scary. Dad and Mom, you should thank Wendy properly, Bo said. Well, I can't tell you how many times I thanked you. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you came to be his wife. No, I was embarrassed. I was happy that my in-laws were happy. I felt a little bad, but I wanted to take care of my beloved husband's family. With that in mind, I began to make payments, and at the same time, we remodeled our house and completed our two-family home. We started living together in a beautiful and spacious house. My parents-in-law were very happy, and my husband's eyes lit up at the new house. I too enjoyed cooking with the new system kitchen, and I was glad to have the remodeling done. It is more convenient and closer to work here. If commuting time is shortened, that gives me more time to spare. I can also make good use of that free time to study. I was spending my days working hard to pay off my debt. However, there was something that bothered me a little. That is, my husband did not help me pay off the debt at all. When I reminded him of my in-laws' debt, he said he would help me pay it off. But he showed no desire to pay it out of his paycheck. When I mentioned this to him before, he told me that his salary was not enough at all to make the payment. I asked my husband what his take-home pay was and asked him to show me his pay stubs, but he stubbornly refused. So I don't know how much money he makes, but it is his responsibility to help pay off his parents' debts. I worked hard for about a year to pay off the debt. At that time, my parents-in-law asked me how much money I had left to repay. If it's been a year, well, you haven't lost that much. Yeah, at most you'll be paying back about $100,000 to $120,000. Well, just to give you an idea, we paid back about $30,000 this year, so the remainder is roughly $90,000, I said. When I said this, my parents-in-law were extremely surprised. What? You paid back that much? Wendy, that's amazing! At that pace, you will finish paying back the loan in about 3 years, in-laws enthusiastically said. If I work hard, I'll be able to pay it off sooner, I replied. Thank you so much. My parents-in-law were crying and happy. I thought that if my husband's parents were happy like this, it was worth all the hard work. A few days later, however, I encountered an unexpected situation. I had to work overtime that day, so I told my husband I would be home late. However, the work went surprisingly smoothly, and moreover, most of us got off early, so I was able to leave on time. So I hurried home as usual, thinking I would cook dinner for my husband. But when I opened the front door, there were my parents-in-law's shoes. Oh, my mother-in-law and her family are here, I thought. I heard my in-laws and my husband talking about something in the living room. You were right to marry that woman, weren't you, Beau? You did great. I can't believe you got a woman with that much money, mother-in-law said. When I found out she worked for a large company, I was very attentive and seduced her, Beau said. You should be more careful. You're one of the people who created that debt, my father-in-law said. What? But I'm the one with the least, husband replied. What are you talking about? How much did you spend on horse racing? Your gambling is terrible, my parents-in-law continued. I get a jackpot once in a while, so there were times when we were in the winning side, my husband defended himself. How can you be in the black when you owe $170,000? Parents-in-law asked. But at this rate, we'll be able to get out of debt and get back on track. That's really great. And she even remodeled our house. I got a really good wife. Well, I'm going to throw her away after she pays off the debt. My husband and parents-in-law laughed. I was so stunned that I couldn't move from the front door for a while. After calming down a little, I made a loud noise as I closed the lock and said, I'm home, from the front door. When I went to the living room, my parents-in-law and husband greeted me with smiles. Oh, Wendy, welcome home. Well then, we're going back to our room. Let's have dinner together again, my husband said. After hearing their conversation, I got goosebumps on my back from that gentle smile of my in-laws. Similarly, I was also shocked by this man pretending to be a good husband with a smile on his face. I wondered what I was doing trying to help them. Didn't you say you had to work late today? My husband asked. Yeah, I've been working a lot more than I expected, so I decided to hurry up and cook dinner and came home on time, I replied. Before dinner, I tried my best to act calm so my husband wouldn't realize I'd heard their conversation. Then when my husband was taking a bath, I stayed in my room and cried alone. I cried as hard as I could. I wanted revenge, and I didn't want to give my husband and parents-in-law a break. From then on, I acted quickly. I began to prepare for the divorce and then steadily made plans for what to do after the divorce. About 3 months passed. I pretended to be happy and told my husband that I had paid off my parents-in-law's debt. What? You paid off the debt? That $170,000? That was supposed to take roughly 3 years, right? My husband exclaimed. Actually, I have quite a bit of money saved up, but I was afraid to pay it off all at once. So I started taking out a little bit from my salary and savings. But we were already below $100,000. And I thought it would be better to pay it all off at once, I explained. Oh, it's true. $90,000 was paid all at once? My husband said, trying to contain his excitement. Wow, Wendy, thank you. My parents are going to love this. My husband put his hands on his face and seemed to be crying, but I knew it was just an act. Soon after that, my parents-in-law also came and thanked me. Thank you so much. We're so glad I met you. You're like God, they said. If I had not known any of this, I would have surely been happy to be along for the ride. Having been deceived, and I already know what these people are really like, and I only acted because I was ready for my plan. A few days later, my husband asked to speak with me. He looked very serious. What on earth? I asked, surprised. I'm sorry, Wendy, but you have to leave me, my husband said. What? What do you mean? I said with a look of surprise. I have a new girlfriend. I'm going to live here with her, so I'm divorcing you, and you're going to my in-laws' place, my husband said matter-of-factly. I was really taken aback by Beau's unexpected statement. I knew from eavesdropping on our earlier conversation that my husband would leave me when he finished paying his debts. However, I did not expect him to openly declare his infidelity. What did he mean by having me go to his in-laws after he left me? I don't really understand what you mean, I said. When I said this, my husband's mood turned sour. Saying you're not very understanding at all? I don't need you anymore. But as a breadwinner or a housekeeper, I can keep you here. my husband said. Then the front door opened and my in-laws came in. "Bo, did you finally tell her?" they asked. "Yeah, I told her," my husband replied. "I wish I could have been there for that moment," he continued. "Oh, that's how it's gonna be. Wendy, you can come to our house if you do chores for us. Of course we'll charge you for the rent," my parents-in-law said. They laughed at me. They are the worst people ever, I thought, but that's more than I can say about them. "Then all of you need to leave," I said. My in-laws rolled their eyes at my comment. "What are you talking about? Have you forgotten? I can easily pay for the rent myself. You changed the name of the house to mine. That's why I have the rights to this house. I can decide who to let live in the house and who to kick out," I said. The faces of my in-laws turned pale at my comment. "I'm sorry, but you can't live here anymore. If we get divorced, you'll be strangers," I said. My in-laws realized the gravity of the situation, but my husband, not wanting to be outdone by me, retorted, "But you took over our debt and paid it in full. You're the one who's losing money. If we had no debt, we could at least afford a new place to live." "That's true. Thank you for letting us live in a nice house while you pay our debts," my in-laws and husband said, so I told them the fact. "I'm sorry, but I didn't pay off the rest of the $90,000 debt," I said. "What? No, but you had money missing from your bank book," my husband said. "That was just a separate account that I created and moved around so that the debt hasn't changed for $90,000. I just haven't had the collections come yet because I've been paying large sums of money continuously. But I think it's time for them to come. So you are responsible for paying the rest," I said. My husband and in-laws were at a loss for words. Then I shot them a warning. "Bo, you told me you were having an affair, so you should pay the alimony. I'll charge your partner for the affair too," I said. "No, she dated me despite my beauty and because I have a house and money. If they charge me alimony, she'll dump me," my husband said. "I don't care anything about that," I replied. "No, I apologize. Please don't leave us," my husband said, afraid of being dumped by the mistress. My in-laws were afraid of being dumped by me. They are truly selfish and scum parents and children in every way. "I have nothing to do with you people anymore, no matter what you say. I have also put this house on the market and will also have you pay your debt of $60,000 that I paid on your behalf through my lawyer," I said. My in-laws froze, stunned by the loss of everything they had. Actually, that renovated in-law house sold for about $300,000. It was in a good location, and there was a family that was just looking for a duplex, so we got a good price. They were able to buy it, so I had to pay $260,000, which included the $60,000 I owed on the debt, and $200,000 for the renovation. I have paid $260,000, but gained $40,000 as a result. In addition, I also get alimony from my ex-husband and the affair partner, which is a very positive situation. On top of that, I was able to get a small payment of $60,000 from my ex-parents-in-law. I am the one who is getting the most out of this situation. I think it's a reasonable request because the damage I've suffered has been so severe that I haven't stopped trusting people. As for me having that much savings to begin with, I was trying to learn how to invest so that I could pay off my in-laws' debts as quickly as possible. And since I had quite a lot of savings to begin with, I put a few tens of thousands of dollars or so into investments. I found that my assets had grown quite a bit in about a year. Plus I had gotten a raise, so I was getting paid quite well. So I was able to take such a drastic step because I had saved a lot of money. I was the biggest beneficiary, and my former in-laws were back in debt, and they lost their house. To be honest, I think they deserved it because they cheated me like fraud people. People like that should go to hell. For once, I should reflect on what happened to me this time and develop a better eye for people. From now on, I will also continue to save and increase my assets so that I can live a luxurious life in my old age. And I want to make many happy memories with people I can truly trust. Despite his skepticism, I decided to confront Marco with a dose of reality. "Do you realize this is my brother's place?" I interjected. "I'm Isabel, a 28-year-old office worker. My parents split when I was young and Dad raised me single-handedly. Their divorce stemmed from Dad's workaholic nature, leaving Mom feeling neglected and ultimately reaching her breaking point. Tired of waiting, she finally said, 'Set me free,' tears streaming down her face. Dad, burdened with guilt, admitted fault, blaming himself for relying too heavily on her. Despite their split, Dad always prioritized me, never missing a school event or special occasion. He shielded me from insensitive comments about our single-parent household with his unwavering love. After the divorce, Mom and I maintained sporadic contact, but her remarriage and new family strained our relationship, leading to an awkward estrangement. Dad, on the other hand, took early retirement to focus on enjoying life. He'd sacrificed so much for me, and I wanted him to indulge in his passions. Then 2 years ago, I married Marco, a man introduced by a friend. Dad approved of him wholeheartedly, and his in-laws welcomed me warmly. But when Marco suggested we move into his family home, I hesitated. Both my parents were aging, and the thought of being far from Dad worried me. He reassured me, insisting he was healthy enough to live independently. "Call me if anything happens," he urged, relinquishing any guilt I felt about leaving him with his blessing. Reluctantly, I agreed to move in with Marco's family, knowing Dad would always be just a phone call away. However, just a few weeks after moving in, I began to regret my decision. Marco and his parents, whom I initially thought were kind, drastically changed their behavior towards me. They began treating me like a servant, assigning all the household chores, cooking, laundry, and cleaning, solely to me while they did nothing. When I asked Marco for help, his response was dismissive. "I'm tired from work. Housework is a wife's job, right?" he'd say. My protests fell on deaf ears. "You married me, so you should be devoted to me and my parents," Marco would retort. Coming home exhausted from work only to face an endless list of chores was overwhelming. But it wasn't just the chores. Marco's mother, Lainey, relentlessly tormented me. She would deliberately spill food to dirty the floor or complain about the slightest speck of dust. "The spot is dirty, you know," she'd command, expecting me to clean it up. And after giving me these orders, she'd carelessly leave dirty clothes strewn about for me to collect. In addition to her incessant demands, Lainey frequently made cutting remarks about my upbringing in a single-father household. "You can't even do housework properly because you weren't raised in a proper family," she'd say with a sneer. "It's a wonder you can hold a job. The company must be blind to hire such a bottom-rung woman." "It's your dad's fault for the way he brought you up," she'd go on. Hearing such insults about Dad stirred a fierce anger within me. But what stung the most was the lack of intervention from Marco and his father, Stanley, as they witnessed Lainey's mistreatment of me. Far from offering any support, Stanley would look at me disdainfully, while Marco would join in with Lainey, mocking me. "Mom's right. You lack any gratitude towards us. That's why she's cold to you," Marco would taunt. "A woman from a dysfunctional family like yours would have been left on the shelf if I hadn't married you. You barely have any merits besides working and doing housework, so do them well. Don't even think of asking to share the chores. It's your role as a wife, and making excuses like being tired from work is absolutely unacceptable. I won't allow it," he would decree. Whenever I tried to stand up for myself or refuse, Marco's mood would visibly sour, and he would begin to treat me as if I were invisible. "How dare you, as a wife, make a fool of me?" he would shout in excessive anger. Then Lainey would add to the tension. "Don't stress Marco when he's tired. You're making things worse for me," she'd interject. Some of the furniture in the in-laws' house was purchased with my money. I was coerced into buying them, abruptly taken to a furniture store and pressured into making the purchase to avoid causing a scene. But the harassment didn't end there. Even when I attempted to visit my family for Christmas, they obstructed me. "You're our wife now. Concentrate on our preparations. We need a feast and thorough cleaning done. Your father's all alone. He can handle it, right? We have other relatives to entertain," they insisted. When I persisted in my desire to go home, they responded childishly, spilling juice on my packed clothes, hiding my shoes, and subjecting me to daily complaints and harassment. Eventually, I reluctantly gave up on the idea of returning home, unable to reveal the truth about my situation. "I'll be staying in to help with Christmas preparations at the in-laws' house. Sorry, I won't be able to make it back," I explained to Dad over the phone. Dad, understanding as always, replied gracefully, "Well, if that's the case, then it can't be helped. Don't worry, dear. It's busier there with more people. I can manage fine alone." The ongoing turmoil in my marriage with Marco had me seriously considering divorce. But the thought of breaking the news to Dad, who was overjoyed about our marriage, troubled me deeply. And to add to the complexity, it was Dad's 60th birthday in the midst of this tumultuous period. In secret, I made reservations at a top-notch restaurant to celebrate Dad's birthday, anticipating objections from Marco and his parents. I simply informed them that I had to make a brief return home. They grumbled but reluctantly agreed, assured by my promise that it would only be for the day. Dad was overjoyed when he learned about the reservation. "I'm truly blessed to have such a wonderful daughter. Thank you so much," he expressed his gratitude, filling me with happiness. Little did I know, this joy would soon turn into disbelief. Upon arrival at the restaurant and informing the staff about our reservation, we were met with an unexpected revelation. A reservation for 2. There are already 3 people claiming to be relatives seated at the table, the staff informed us. Confused, I approached the reserved table, only to find Marco and my in-laws comfortably seated there. Marco noticed me, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Looks like your attempt to dine fancy just with your father failed," he taunted. My in-laws paid no attention to our arrival, engrossed in the lavish meal they had ordered. Dad, witnessing Marco and my in-laws at the table, looked bewildered, his gaze shifting between us. He had only seen the pleasant side of Marco and my in-laws, so his confusion was understandable. Marco, suspicious of my cheerful demeanor about returning home, had invaded my privacy by snooping through my mobile phone. Discovering the plans for Dad's 60th birthday celebration at the upscale restaurant, Marco had preemptively made reservations and ordered dishes to ruin our surprise. With a triumphant expression, he mocked us. "People from poor single-father households like you don't belong in fancy restaurants. Know your place. Let us enjoy the dishes here. Be grateful we're allowing you this much. You lot should go to some cheap pub," he declared, oblivious to the disdainful glances from other patrons. Beside Dad, Marco's audacity left him speechless. I was completely at a loss. While I knew Marco and his family were self-centered, their behavior at Dad's special 60th celebration was beyond belief. My anger simmered as they tarnished what should have been a joyous occasion. I kept my irritation in check and didn't yell, but just calmly addressed Marco and his relatives. "This is my brother's establishment. He invited us here to celebrate Dad's birthday," I stated firmly. At my words, the triumphant Marco and the disinterested in-laws froze. My brother, who had been quietly observing from the back of the restaurant, emerged with a stern expression. He was taken by Mom during the divorce, but unlike our estranged mom, he has maintained and cherished his relationship with Dad and me. As the owner of the restaurant, it was my brother who had suggested celebrating Dad's milestone here. Though he couldn't make it to the wedding due to work, he recognized Marco from the photos. Initially, he assumed Marco and his party were part of the celebration. But witnessing Marco's disrespect toward me and Dad and the in-laws' indifference, my brother was incensed. "How dare you speak to my sister and Dad like that?" he thundered. "I regret extending courtesy just because you're Isabel's family. Is this how you always treat her? I reserved this table for my sister's wish to celebrate Dad, not for freeloaders. We will celebrate Dad and my sister's occasion another day. As for the bill, you'll be settling it." Marco and his group scrambled to offer excuses, but my brother left them to the staff and escorted Dad and me outside. "I'm sorry for allowing such people into the restaurant and ruining the celebration. I'll make it right," he apologized sincerely. On the way home, I recounted to Dad the mistreatment me endured from Marco and the in-laws. After listening in silence, Dad spoke up. "If your marriage brings you unhappiness, it's not worth it. Don't concern yourself with me. Come back home." So, instead of returning to the in-laws' house, I headed straight to my own. Shortly after, my brother called to update me on Marco and the in-laws. They had caused a scene over the bill, but eventually paid up when threatened with police intervention. Minutes later, Marco rang me up. "Where are you? You've humiliated us. Send back the money we paid," he demanded. "I won't give another cent. I'm through with you and we're getting a divorce. I've gathered evidence of the bullying, so be prepared," I firmly replied. I had been collecting evidence of the harassment from Marco and the in-laws, which they never suspected. According to a lawyer I consulted, the forced purchases and other financial exploitations were enough to prove psychological abuse. Realizing I was serious about divorce, Marco panicked. No one but me would marry a woman from a single-father household. Do you want to upset Dad? He threatened. I scoffed. Dad said my happiness matters most. I'd rather be with him than care for the likes of you. Still, Marco warned, you'll regret this. Think it over. But I hung up and proceeded with the divorce preparations. Eventually, Marco and I divorced. He was reluctant due to societal image, but finally gave in as we neared court. I secured substantial evidence of psychological abuse, ensuring I received a fair settlement in the divorce. Additionally, during the property distribution, I took the furniture I had purchased for the in-laws' house, having the legal right as the buyer. The in-laws tried to complain, but my lawyer simply stated, the purchaser naturally has the right of possession, leaving them defeated. A few months after returning to my parents' home, Marco reached out, wanting to reconcile. Apparently on the day that triggered our divorce at the restaurant, Marco's boss and colleagues were there for a work celebration. They heard everything he said to me and Dad. Marco's boss, who had struggled growing up in a single-parent home, was disappointed in Marco's disparaging remarks about single-father households. Marco lost his standing and any chance of advancement at work. Moreover, his colleagues had spread the story, and he was now regarded with contempt at work. The problems didn't stop at the company. The in-laws' house became chaotic too. Before our divorce, Marco and the in-laws had all household chores on me, and post-divorce, the in-laws entrenched in laziness, bickering over who should do the chores. Marco was being pressured by the in-laws to buy new furniture to replace what I took and to contribute more financially. I was wrong, Isabel. I took advantage of your kindness too much. I've truly reflected and want to start over. Marco pleaded for reconciliation. But my feelings had cooled significantly. He likely faced more pressure to do chores at the in-laws' house and wanted me back to resume my role as a housekeeper, I thought. Perhaps he was also trying to offload some of the financial demands from the in-laws onto me. So I firmly rejected his proposal. No way. I wouldn't get back with you even if you paid me. I remember how you changed after we got married. As soon as we got married, you started exploiting me. I was foolish not to divorce you sooner without worrying about Dad. Then perhaps Dad's 60th wouldn't have been ruined. Now we're divorced and strangers to each other. If you contact me again, I'll consult my lawyer. I hung up the phone. Perhaps my mention of a lawyer resonated because I received no further reconciliation attempts from Marco. Now I'm living happily at home with Dad, and my brother occasionally visits, bringing gifts. His wife is pregnant, and he seems truly happy. Dad and I are both looking forward to the arrival of his baby, although I am not considering marriage anytime soon. But if the opportunity arises, I will now choose more wisely.